Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the Haydn Symphony Crusade. And we're up to Symphony number 47 in G major. And we're in the very middle of the Sturm und Drang period. And that gives us a wonderful opportunity to really clarify what exactly was going on, at least with Haydn, in the Sturm und Drang period. Sturm und Drang means storm and stress. And the Sturm und Drang symphonies, or at least some of them, are famous for their incredibly high levels of tension and emotional expressiveness, sometimes verging on hysteria. Yeah, well, that's one thing Haydn was doing. But he was also doing humor, incredible expansions of the musical capabilities to produce humor. And he also was experimenting in all kinds of ways with form and with balance and trying to figure out what a symphony could be, what a theoretically abstract, you know what I mean, piece of music in several sections could do. And the scope of his music at this point was expanding in all directions at once, rhythmically and expressively and instrumentally. And he had this fabulous little orchestra at the Schloss Esterházy and Eisenstadt. When they were in Vienna, they were at Eisenstadt, which was actually outside of Vienna, but Vienna, and are near sort of to Vienna. Somebody gave you a whole lecture on Austrian geography when I mentioned that. So don't do it again. We don't care. And, and then Esterházy, which was in a Hungarian swamp, and that's where he hung out during the summer or the winter or whatever it was. And he had an orchestra, bottom line. An orchestra was all his. It was his orchestra. He was in charge of it. And so he could do whatever he wanted. And Symphony number 47 is a wonderful example of that. It is not the most Sturm und Drangy of the Sturm und Drang symphonies. It's not emotionally hysterical. It's emotionally very interesting. It actually has quite a bit of depth and wonderful feelings. But Haydn was after new feelings. I mean, he was after more than just, well, music is happy or it can be sad, or because it's Sturm und Drangy, it can be happier and it can be even sadder. Yes, he did that. But he also did everything in the middle. Music could be intellectual, it could be fun, it could be witty, it could be relaxed, it could be all of these things. And all of these symphonies have elements of all of those things. And 47 is just one of those. And I'm going to talk about, in this particular chat, some very specific elements of number 47. It's scored for the normal ensemble that he had at his disposal at the time. 2 oboes, 2 horns, strings, and a bassoon on the bottom, and sometimes continuo if you wanted that, which we don't. We really don't. And we don't have that here as performed by the Cologne Chamber Orchestra under Helmut Müller-Brühl. I mean, we are at the birth of the modern orchestra, the birth of modern orchestration, of writing for the modern orchestra. So much of this was all pioneered by Haydn. And even with this tiny little orchestra, he does so much in terms of color and expression. It's incredible. So what are we talking about? First of all, Symphony number 47 is an intellectual symphony. And I know that sounds terrible because I know there are so many people out there who only like romantic music. They listen to music because they want to hear the emotion. And that's fine. I get it. Emotion's wonderful. They want to hear that intensity of expression that we hear in like Tchaikovsky. Well, this is not what this symphony is about. This symphony is about what music can do in a more serene sphere. It has some very, very intense, almost chilling minor key passages that seem quite dark and on the verge of something much more emotionally intense. But it doesn't go there. It doesn't go there. And I really want to talk just about the musical qualities that Haydn's asking us as listeners to enjoy for their own sake. Not because they express something else, like death. But he does that. He's going to do it in the next couple symphonies. Number 49 is coming up there. La Passione, the Passion of Christ. I mean, that is not a happy symphony. But this one is in G major, and it's completely serene. Now, the wonderful thing about the first movement is that both of its main themes or subjects, the first subject and the second subject, are almost not even tunes. They are musical objects. But those musical objects, yes, they're based on a certain melodic sort of shape, kind of, but they aren't. The first subject is a march in what's called the Mozart rhythm, because it was Mozart's favorite rhythm. Get it? That rhythm is bum, bum, ba-dum, bum, bum. Mozart used that constantly. Just think of the Jupiter Symphony, the first big outburst. Yum, bum, ba-dum, bum, bum. There it is. I mean, you'll find it everywhere in Mozart. Haydn had a rhythm too. Haydn's rhythm was zippier. It was yum, ba-da-dum, bum, bum. That was Haydn's rhythm. And Mahler's, by the way. You'll find that composers often have, certain characteristics that they use frequently. And that Haydn had a rhythm. But in this case, he's using the Mozart rhythm to create a slow march. And this thing just repeats itself over and over again, and stacks up the harmony in a very dissonant, interesting way. It's dum, bum, ba-dum, bum, bum. Between the strings go boom, 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 ba-doom, like that. And that's all it is. It repeats itself, and it piles up until it makes a rather harmonically clashing and interesting sort of like, pile. It's a pile up. It makes a pile. And then it slowly works its way towards the second subject with lots of interjections of that rhythm. I mean, the whole thing is based on that rhythm. So it's not about a tune. It's about a rhythm. And it's about harmony, but not melody. Not melody at all. Now, the second subject is completely different. The second subject is how do I describe it? It's also sort of a pile-up, but in a different way. It has three simultaneous elements. Those elements are a bass line that's just going boom, 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 and a very quick violin part in triplets going da 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 da, and then an oboe solo in very long notes. Ya da da da. It also never really reaches the stage of like a tune. It's three elements, and Haydn wants us to hear them distinctly but simultaneously. And think about that for a minute. Just think about the idea that Haydn's giving you three completely distinct ideas presented all at once, and you hear them with perfect clarity. He's asking us to expand the knowledge of what we're capable of taking in as listeners, because we can do that. We can hear multiple parts that balance and hear them all at once and singly, and focus on whatever one we want. And it's just marvelous. I love this second subject. It is so cool. But I'm going to play the whole exposition for you, and I'll mark the first and second subjects so you can hear them distinctly. But that description, I think, gives you all you need to know. And then what I want to do is skip to the recapitulation. Because the recapitulation, technically in a sonata form movement, which is what this is, you have a first subject, you have some transitional music, then a second subject, and then a concluding bit. And then you have a development section where all of that stuff gets mixed up and repeated in interesting ways. And then you have a recap that brings you back to the opening, supposedly all in the original key, which is a sunny and serene G major. That's not what happens here. That's not what happens at all. In fact, Haydn rearranges the entire recapitulation. Everything happens in a different order. The first subject comes back, and it's in a minor key, almost unrecognizably. I mean, it's the first subject. It's a development of it, but you wouldn't say, that's the moment where we return to the home key, because it ain't. But it is technically, from a formal point of view. So it's in a dark minor key. And then instead of having the transitional music going to the second subject, he skips right to it in the home key. So there you go. So now we know we're home. And then he continues with the continuation of the previous first subject in the home key and then wraps it all up. So everything happens in a different order. And it's just fascinating. But because these things are so distinctive, each has its own personality and character, you can follow it with absolutely perfect clarity. So I am going to play the first movement exposition and then the first movement recapitulation to the end of the movement. And I let you go listen to the rest, the development and everything that happens in between that explains how we get to that recapitulation. That's for you to figure out. So you ready? Here is the exposition where I'll mark the first and second subjects for your delectation. Cool, isn't it? They're so different, these two subjects. One, just that march rhythm. The other, this layer cake, 3 separate layers of musical activity, all happening simultaneously. And it's marvelous. Now, is it like darkly expressive and intense? Well, not exactly, but listen to what happens when we come to the recapitulation and everything returns, but in a different order. Whoa! I mean, you see how the thing is with Haydn, he's never formulaic, ever. He's always developing and reimagining his ideas, but creating that sense of formal balance that classical period music always has to have, and usually does have, at least in its mature manifestations. So that's the first movement of this absolutely fascinating symphony. It may not be something that's going to, hit you in the gut like that emotionally. But if you've got a brain and your ears are attached to that brain, it's fascinating. It's just wonderful to listen to purely for itself. It is pure music doing things that only music can do in the most musical possible way. So that's the first movement. Now, the second movement, we're not going to play a sample of because the rest of the symphony is just so interesting, and I've got to draw the line somewhere. It's a theme and variations. And the variations are very simple. It's a rather cool movement, expressively. The idea, again, is just to listen to the modifications of the melody from one to the next, and it's always pretty clear where the tune is. These aren't the kind of variations where you lose track of the melody. Haydn is being very nice to us. He says, just listen to how beautifully I can ornament and decorate this lovely tune. And at the very end, as so often happens with Haydn, there is a sudden intake of breath as if darker forces are at work. And you'll listen to it and you'll just go, just before the end. And then he says, no, that's not what we're about here. That's okay. It's all right. But it's a wonderful, wonderful, affecting moment, made all the more so because it's so unexpected. And Haydn, of course, is a master of the unexpected. So you'll listen to that too. Now, the minuet. Oh my God, this is something special, this minuet. And we're going to play the whole thing because it's very short. But the reason it's very short is because the minuet consists of a phrase played forward twice, and then Haydn simply says, play it backwards. That's it. He doesn't even write it out that way. He just expects the players to play it. You read it from left to right, and then it just says, read it from right to left. And that's what you do. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating not just because it sounds so perfectly normal and natural. You might not even notice that it's being read backwards, but it is by everybody. Remember, by the whole orchestra. Everything that they did the first time, they're doing in reverse the second time. And you can tell that it's going backwards because he gives accents and things that allow you to know where you are in this very short, it's just a 10, 12 seconds, all the way through it, 15 seconds. But the interesting thing about it also is that not only does it go forward and backwards, but it has very irregular phrase lengths. And that makes it sound even quirkier. And we've talked about Haydn's irregular phrasing, where things are 6 bars or 3 bars or 5 bars. That's what this is. And so it sounds played forward too short. But when you play it backwards, it sounds okay because the short, weird phrase comes first and the longer, more balanced phrase comes second. And so the backwards version has a much more satisfying feel than the frontwards version. I mean, this is just such genius. It's just unbelievable. And the trio section, the middle section, which is thematically related to the minuet, also happens frontways and then backwards. And the orchestration is designed to let you hear that, especially in the middle section, which begins with horns and woodwinds solo, and then strings, and then of course it's strings, and then horns and woodwinds to end it. And I want to play you the whole thing because it's just one of the coolest movements in the history of humanity. And it's all designed so that you know what's going on if you think about it. And that's the key with this whole symphony. It's about stimulating the little gray cells, as Hercule Poirot would say. It tickles your neurons in such a fascinating way. So here is the complete frontwards and backwards minuet. Don't you want to just go hear it again? I mean, really? Isn't it just like unbelievably cool? I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to play it again because this will get very long. But yeah, I mean, that's a serious genius at work. Not because he can write things that go frontwards and backwards. That was done since the dawn of time. I mean, Bach did it all the time with counterpoint and fugal themes. You could play them in what they call retrograde. But that's not the point. The point is to do it and to make it fun and fascinating and really, really get you thinking about what it's doing. I mean, that's what Haydn does. You know, it's not a mechanical exercise at all. It's art. Yeah. Now, the finale. The finale is also a major innovation in its way. It's what's called a sonata rondo. Now, it's a new form. It's a hybrid form, but it's a new form that Haydn basically invented, of course. And there are about 5 or 6 different variants of this particular hybrid form. But what they all have in common is this. A rondo, as you may recall, is a finale that has the form A, B, A, C, A, where A is what's called a ritornello. It's a theme that comes back. And then you have sections in between. And those sections can be anything, but they all lead back to the ritornello. And so they alternate back and forth, you know, as many times as the composer wants to do it. Usually in classical periods, they have 5 sections. It's A, B, A, C, A, something like that. Now, a sonata movement, which we just heard, has 2 distinct subjects or thematic ideas, then a central development section, and then a repeat of them. So when you jam these 2 things together, squish them together, here's what happens. The sonata exposition, the first subject and the second subject, can be, but isn't always, a sort of thing where the first subject is your ritornello, and the second subject is your episode, and then the first subject comes back as sort of like a introduction to what's going to be the development, and then the development develops, and then you do it again at the other end of it. So basically what you're getting is A, B, A, another A, then the development is C, and then your recapitulation is A, B, and you end with A, something like that. I mean, they can all be a little bit different in how it all sort of shakes out at the end, but in this particular case, you have this wonderfully serene tune. I mean, you finally get a really good tune. Ya da 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 dum. Ya da 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 dum. Ya da dum. Yum ba dum. You can hum it. It's beautiful, and it's mellow, and it's sunny and lovely, and so you hear that, and then you hear a bit of busyness, and you're heading toward what you think is the second subject, but no, you get the ritornello again, and then you get, you know, another thing, and then it goes back. Now, one of the ways you know you're in a sonata rondo, by the way, is that because these are sonata movements, they have big structural repeats. You have an exposition, and that exposition gets repeated. So you know you're in a sonata movement. And then the rondo parts gradually take shape as it does not do sonata-ish things. You'll hear that tune keep coming back with episodes in the middle and whatnot. So I'm going to play the whole finale, including the exposition repeat. Now, you know, there can also be second half repeats, which we don't hear in this performance. So the whole thing is a giant sonata form, but it depends on how many times you want to hear that opening tune, the ritornello, which I think is wonderful. And of course, Haydn being Haydn, he keeps the opening phrase the same. Ya da 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 dum. Ya da 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 dum. That's always the same. But the continuation is different every time you hear it. So he doesn't bore you with having it just repeat itself. You're never quite sure whether you're hearing an exact repetition of the opening or whether it's going to go somewhere else and do something else, or whether it's, you know, it's Haydn. It's constantly surprising, but it's also very stable because this symphony has had a lot of odd things happening. And so he's sort of alternating between surprising and off-kilter stuff, as in the first movement, and more balanced stuff, as in the theme and variation second movement, and then that really, really special minuet, and then a finale that just celebrates the key of G major quite beautifully. So here it is, the entire finale in sonata / rondo form with the continuous return of the first subject and separated by other bits. And that's really all you have to know about it. I mean, form is easy when you get right down to it. People try to make it very complicated, but it's really not. It really isn't. And it makes a wonderful finale. And the point is that that finale is big. It's over 5 minutes long. It's almost as long as the first movement. And so this symphony is starting to spread the riches around more than in his previous symphonies. He's finding new ways to balance out the musical interest among all the movements while still making a finale fresh and light and breezy, and the minuet interesting rhythmically and dance-like. And, he retains the essential characters of all of these pieces while giving them more musical content. And that is what the Sturm und Drang movement was all about. So again, this is the Cologne Chamber Orchestra with Helmut Müller-Brühl on Naxos in the finale of Symphony number 47, the whole shebang. Don't you love that tune? Can't you listen to it like 450 times? It's amazing. Absolutely amazing, as is the whole symphony. And I hope that what you take away from this particular chat is that some of these symphonies, even the ones that are not going to be the ones with nicknames or the most famous ones, they are so full of stuff worth listening to and enjoying just because it's beautiful. Just beautiful and interesting and witty and full of life and invention. And Haydn wants you to enjoy that. I mean, it's absolutely, it's just joy in tones. That's what this is, and that's what this symphony is. So keep on listening, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. Number 48, the Maria Teresa, one with a nickname, is coming next. Take care.